shared with other folks who aren't here tonight. My name is Kevin, and our journey continues. We finally made it into this century. We only have one more of these next month, kind of crazy. So let's get started. All right, I'm going to put my contact information in the chat window here. After the presentation, if you have any questions, you may always call or email. So that is there in the chat window. If you have questions during the presentation, you may also use that chat window to let me know. All right. Share, there it is. And there it is. And there it is. Slideshow. Slideshow. Come on, wake up. There it is. From the beginning. All right, I think I'm ready. I will probably be letting some more folks in here. So there will be moments when I have to pause to do that, but otherwise we are a-okay. So hello everyone, and as I said, happy spring. It is time for Denver through the decades, the aughts. A lot of people don't use aught anymore. Although if you watch The Music Man, when Professor Harold Hill comes to Iowa, he says he was part of Gary, Indiana Gary Conservatory, class of '06. Aught being 0. So when I refer to that decade, I usually say the aughts, but folks younger than I am have no idea what I'm talking about. So it's kind of fun how in 100 years, the usage of that word has vanished. Nothing to do with tonight, I suppose, just fun. Yay for English. What a crazy language. Sorry, letting more folks in here. And there I am. Hi, Kevin. And let's keep going. All right, so around Denver, we have chronicled the various cities that have come in around us, and we have some that joined us here in the first decade of this century. 2001, the city and county of Broomfield. Broomfield was actually founded a while ago, back in the 50s, as a city, but in the 1990s, Broomfield had grown into 4 different counties, which made for a lot of craziness. So they voted to become a city and a county, which was put into effect in '01. So that is why Broomfield is like Denver. It is a city and a county. It is the smallest of the counties in the state and our most recent county. I don't think we're going to get any more counties. Aurora at one point did talk about becoming a city and county, but I think that kind of vanished. If you look at the pictures here, in the lower right-hand side, that is the grave marker for Shep, the turnpike dog. Back in the 1950s, when the Denver-Boulder Turnpike went in, there was a dog who basically came every day to greet folks as they went by one of the pay stations, and folks loved it. They would not only pay their fee, but they would often end up bringing food for Shep. The dog was kind of a mystery. No one knew where the dog had really come from, but it became a beloved figure in Broomfield. Eventually, Shep died and was buried there by the pay station. The highway eventually went over the grave. When they were redoing the road, they found Shep's grave, and Shep has now been moved to the Depot Museum there in Broomfield. So you see Shep's new grave marker there in Broomfield. Centennial 2001. We're going to see boundary pictures for all of these in a few moments. That picture that you see in the lower middle there, and the one to the left of it, that's one of the mile houses. Those are both from Centennial. The piece of art down in the lower middle, they have this wonderful park right next to the Centennial City Hall, and there's this piece of art that shows you the various topography and environmental offerings of Colorado, and I just took a picture of it. I thought it was really neat. Castle Pines 2007, we're going to come to that here in a moment. All right. One of the things I like to do when I have my presentations is put border maps in there. For those of you who've traveled with me before, you know that this is a comment I make a lot. Most of the metropolitan area, the cities there just have incredibly stupid boundaries. In fact, there are only 3 really that have sensible boundaries. Broomfield is not the worst, but you notice that they annexed the Northwest Parkway up there. They just annexed the road. You see where it says the gap? Believe it or not, Broomfield annexed the road that takes you over an underpass. A road is there. That's Wadsworth or 287. 287 underneath is not Broomfield, but the bridge above is Broomfield. So crazy, crazy boundaries. So this is the city and county of Broomfield. Here's Centennial. Holy snot, look at those boundaries. I don't even know what to tell you. This sort of stuff, I don't know, shouldn't be legal, but I'm not governor yet, so what are you going to do? One of these days, I'll fix this, I hope. You see, Centennial is quite the east to west kind of city. Even though they've gone all the way east here, they didn't manage to absorb everything on the west side, so kind of crazy. Centennial is named for the book by James Michener that chronicled Americans from the east moving to this area, displacing the natives and creating the Centennial State. So kind of fun, a city named for a work of fiction. And here's Castle Pines. Castle Pines is south of the metro area, just a tiny bit. It's between Castle Rock and what is now the southernmost city that people kind of know as a city, Lone Tree. It's funny, when I was putting this presentation together, I was using the Castle Pines map from 2015, which is when I generated all of those. 8 years later, Castle Pines has gone bananas and has expanded hugely, which is why you see it here. I needed to update the map. So a question comes in, are the areas in between the weird boundaries part of the county? Yes, so those are still unincorporated county space. So up there in Centennial, that would still be part of Arapahoe County, for example. I don't know, I'm sure it makes sense to someone. Anyway, Castle Pines got in a big kerfuffle with Castle Rock and some other folks about its expansion, but so far Castle Pines, it's crossed the interstate now and it has great plans for the future. Although if you look here, even Castle Pines has weird extensions, pieces there right below the word castle and pines that they did not annex. I don't know why. So yeah, crazy times. These 3 cities came in the aughts, the first decade of this century. We've also added some skyscrapers. If you remember, we talked about the skyscraper boom in the early 1980s that sort of went kaput as the economy in Colorado slowed down significantly. We really didn't have much in the way of new skyscrapers for about 20 years. The Hyatt Regency that you see here on the left, that came in. And if you look there on the right, that's the spire. I always like to point out that the building in downtown Denver that has a spire is not the spire. The spire is spireless. The building with the spire is the Four Seasons. Anyway, the Hyatt Regency that you see there on the left is significant for one thing, in my opinion. There at the far right-hand side, very top, there's a wonderful bar there. And while I'm a teetotaler, I'd love to go there and get my Coke and watch the sunset. So if you haven't been up there, what is it, the 27th floor? If you haven't been up there for the view yet, you should go. It's wonderful. It is the highest you may legally get in a building in Denver. So it's a great place to watch the sunset. So some new skyscrapers in Denver. All right, these maps were produced by Ken Treppel over at Denver Infill and Denver Urbanism. You and I have been marching along with these maps for a good long time now. Unfortunately for us, they stop in the aughts. So this is the last one we're going to be able to do. One was not yet or has not yet been produced for the teens. So again, the gray areas that have already been filled and the red areas that were filled during that decade. So you notice Green Valley Ranch, which is way over in the right-hand side, upper right-hand side That land would have come in as part of the acquisition, of land from Adams County for the airport, and lots of expansion in that area. Montbello some, Southwest Denver some, and then just sort of filling in. But notice the difference between Stapleton, which is a big gap there in sort of the upper middle, and in the aughts, and we are going to talk about this, the construction begins. Notice that the construction in the area formerly known as Stapleton started at the bottom. We started at the south end, working our way up. Today, they've made it all the way up to that square at the top. All right, let's march along. All right, as always, I am covering things that I thought I could cover that were interesting to me or that occurred to me. I am not covering everything that happened in this 10-year period. If I do not cover your favorite thing or your favorite moment, I apologize. In a whole decade, there are simply too many things to cover. So I'll apologize now for anything that I miss. In the aughts, we had a very long drought. From 2000, the longest duration of drought in Colorado lasted 395 weeks, from 2001 to 2009. The most intense period was back in '02, where a D4, and if you look here at the map here, the color map on the lower left-hand side, 2003 to 2004, that area is where we had the intensity spike for the first time to a level D4 drought. And that affected 34% of the state. Now, it's kind of a fun thing that I like to point out. In '02, I took my very first tour with Denver Water. I was not in this business yet, but I took a tour with Denver Water to see the Highline Canal. I loved that tour. It was wonderful. At that time, I'll never forget, because I was wondering what we were going to do, A, and B, it seemed so far away. During that tour, Denver Water, our host, said, Denver Water has enough water now to meet the needs of the city through 2020. And I thought, oh my goodness, what are we going to do in 2020? We're going to run out of water. Well, folks, I take tours with Denver Water every year now, and they have told us that through better water management, water recycling, fixing of the system, expansion of the system, all these things, that Denver Water actually has more water now and uses less water than it did in 2002. That being said, drought has been a pernicious and ongoing aspect of our lives for the last 20 plus years. And as you can see, it just marked along with some awful periods there. There are numerous sources online if you would like to look up more information about the droughts in the various parts of the state. Denver, of course, right along with it, we are affected by it. A lot of our water comes from up in the mountains. One of the things I like to do with my tour groups is study water. Last year, it was about a year ago now, we did a tour to look at the Arkansas River, and we stopped at the dam that you see there on the right-hand side, and the gentleman on the left-hand side that you see there talked to us about how water was being managed in the southeastern part of the state along the Arkansas River watershed. And we got an earful on a lot of what's happening. One of the main terms that he used at that point is what's called buy and dry. Cities along the Front Range are going out into rural communities, especially farms, buying their water rights. That water then comes to the city along the Front Range, and that community that was farming ends up going dry, not in the alcohol sense, but in the water sense. Now, this is not happening everywhere, and it's not that the water's not getting used when it does get bought, but what it does mean is there are some changes to the ways of life that are going on in the southeastern part of the state. We can talk about that another time, perhaps. There's a huge debate about the yes, the no, the good, the bad, but water has been on our mind, and it started back there in about 2001, 2002. All right. One of the things that we've been doing since the beginning of the century is working on water recycling. This picture on the right-hand side is from Denver Water. The picture on the upper left-hand side is a picture I took when we took a tour of Denver Water last year. The Denver Water Recycling Plant opened in '04. Purple is associated with water recycling, not just in Colorado, but apparently it's become the color around the world for water recycling. So when you see a purple pipe, you know it is recycled water. Now, Mother Nature recycles water all the time, and we don't think about it so much. We do it on a much smaller scale. So what they do, of course, is they take the water that you flush or goes down the drain or from your shower or washing your hands, or that comes in through storm drains, whatever it is, it comes into the system. Look at the bottom center there where it says Metro Water Recovery. That is the new name for what used to be called the waste treatment plant. A lot of people go, ew, because of course that's where your toilet water goes. But now they've given it a better name. It's a little more evocative of good things, Metro Water Recovery. And notice to the right of that, it says reclaimed water. And notice how it sweeps back around counterclockwise up to a golf course. And that is part of what we're doing. This water is cleaned to the point where it is safe enough to be used on areas like parks, golf courses, and in our lakes. So if you go to Washington Park, City Park, Berkeley Park, Rocky Mountain Lake Park, all of these lakes and our parks and golf courses are going to be watered often, or have those lakes filled with gray water, as it's called. Now, if you were to fall into one of those lakes and take a drink, don't fear, you're fine. I mean, you might not want to make a habit of it, but the water is safe enough for the wildlife, and you could take a swig and you'd be fine. Water recycling in Denver has not been a total panacea, of course. They are finding that some of the watering with gray water is causing some higher salt content in the soil, and salt, of course, is bad for plants. We're trying to figure it out. So not 100% certain what that's going to be. Part of that has been helped along in this decade by the Plant Select expansion of plants that you may use for the arid West. So water, yay water. We all like water. And in 2002, we didn't have enough, but now we do have more. So Denver has room to grow. And in 2004, we got water recycling, which is pretty sweet. By the way, if you have not taken a tour of that plant, they do offer free tours. It is a fascinating tour, and you should absolutely go. All right, Denver has had 2 presidential conventions. We did already talk about the presidential convention in 1908 when the Democrats chose William Jennings Bryan. In 2008, we chose as the presidential candidate Barack Obama. So one succeeded, one did not. So as I like to say, Denver is batting 500. We had our presidential convention in Denver in '08. It was held partly at the Pepsi Center, as it was known then. They had other events, as you see Mile High Stadium here on the lower left-hand side, and in various places around the city. I mean, this was a big to-do. We had a lot of folks here for the convention. So there are pieces of memorabilia that I don't own, but are out there if you'd like to buy one. The one on the right belongs to Groovy Dude, if you wanted a Democratic National Convention pin. So yeah, that happened in 2008. There were a lot of people here, brought a lot of business to Colorado during that time period. Someone is saying, I was there. I helped with phone service for the Democratic National Convention for the year ahead. She's saying so many memories. That does sound a lot of fun. I also remember everything was just very, very crowded in downtown Denver. It was crazy. But again, brought a lot of money into the city. Okay, there we go. Next slide. So in the first century of the year, we got our bridges that are the continuation of the 16th Street Mall. Now, the original 16th Street Mall we talked about in the 1980s, opened in 1982, originally went from Civic Center Station to Market Street Station. Well, eventually they continued it northwest until it reached Union Station, but eventually it reaches the giant train tracks for the coal trains and all that, and that's it. We're not going to go over those. So what they ended up doing back in '01, the picture on the far left-hand side, that is called the Millennium Bridge. I'm sorry, not '01, in 2000, excuse me. It's called the Millennium Bridge because it opened in 2000. The Millennium Bridge goes over the train tracks. It is the first of the bridges that continue the 16th Street Mall northwest. The second bridge, I call it the Walrus Tusk Bridge, is in the lower middle there. That goes over the South Platte River. The third bridge, the one that was built the most recently, is the upper right-hand side, and that is the bridge that goes over the interstate. So these three bridges, all sort of thematic, they're white so that you have that continuation of theme, take us over the impediments between downtown Denver and the neighborhood on the other side of all those impediments. The neighborhood on the other side of the river, once upon a time, the city of Highland. Later on, that name sort of dropped out. Now they've given it a somewhat cloying name, Lohi, but there it is. So these three bridges all opened in that first decade of our century. I do want to warn you, my personal opinion here, 100% personal opinion, so take it for what you will. You do want to watch out, because if you go to that third and final bridge that you see there in the upper right-hand side, you will find, in my personal opinion, the most hideous piece of art in the state. And that is the giant pile of bags of blood that you see here in the foreground in front of the bridge. I put it in there because every time I look at it, it just fills me with misery. I envision it as a bag of blood vampire food festival. It's not actually called that. It's called National Velvet. I try not to look at it, but hey, if you'd like to go see it yourself, it's at that bridge. Okay, so let me make sure I didn't miss anything there. Okay. All right, so Stapleton Airport was decommissioned back in the 1990s. And over the next few years, there was a process of demolition and moving and changing things around. And in the very beginning of this century, the plan went into place to redevelop Stapleton Airport. It began in 2001, done by Forest City, USA, covering 7.5 square miles. Here, if you look to the left-hand side, those are some of the guidelines for the project. If you look at the map on the right-hand side, it will give you sort of the land use for the area. The general plan was that they would start at the southern end, gradually working their way northward. Another idea was that you would not build more houses until the houses that you'd already built were generally occupied. That way you don't end up having a lot of unused housing stock just sort of sitting there. So the area formerly known as Stapleton has become a very desirable neighborhood. You've got shopping, you've got dining, you've got parks. It's got a lot to recommend it. So if you haven't been out to this area and done some exploration, you might do so. Started back in 2001 with its town center. The idea was, if you want to live near amenities or even above amenities, you'd have a little town center to act as the beating heart of the area. So there at 29th and Quebec, they started with their town center. So here you have two visions of that area. You've got little parks, ground floor retail and restaurants. Above it, you have residential. So this is great because when you want to get your Cold Stone Creamery on, or if you want to go get your dog groomed, all you have to do is go downstairs, and all that stuff is below you. Here on the picture on the upper left-hand side, there's a large area where they have movies in the summer, so it's a lot of fun. They did keep some of the buildings. In addition to all of the houses there, if you look behind and to the left, you're going to see the old control tower. Now, the control tower currently itself, the actual tower, is not open to the public. It is not ADA compliant. So right now it is just cordoned off and is waiting for some future developer to have enough money to make it available. Right now it's just being kept there for some future use. So we do have 2 or 3 buildings still left from the original Stapleton Airport. Overall, about 1/3 of what used to be Stapleton and is now a neighborhood is being converted into parkland. If you look here, an aerial view of this property, you're going to see lots of green space. So the hope is no one will have to go very far without having access to a park. Now, not all of them are large. They have a lot of what are called pocket parks, a little spot, maybe a block or even just half a block, where you may go with your friends or family or kids or dog or whatever it might be and have your little bit of green in the area formerly known as Stapleton. Okay, now we get on to another part of our story. I used to say that the smell of Colorado was pine. I don't say that anymore. The smell of marijuana now is, I'm sorry, the smell of Colorado now is marijuana. And I don't know, like it or don't like it, I think that's just kind of the way it is. It was back in the 1st century of this decade that we legalized medical marijuana back in '05. The idea was if you had a slip from the doctor saying you needed it for this, that, or the other, you could get your medical marijuana. Tom Noel, Dr. Colorado, likes to say, when we talk about this, you never saw so many young people who suddenly had chronic back pain. Anyway, that of course started the floodgates. Medical marijuana was the first one. 2012, you would get recreational marijuana. And yeah, today we have a new state smell. So good or ill, I don't know. There it is. I know what I think, but we'll just leave it at that. Okay. Now, the Rocky Mountain Arsenal is something we've touched on several times. I love to talk about the Arsenal because I love visiting the Arsenal. That place just makes me happy. Even though, of course, it's all kinds of toxic waste below the surface, ostensibly, it's never going to be exposed again and no one will ever get touched by it. So it was during the decade we're talking about now that all of that remediation work, all of that effort finished, and the Rocky Mountain Arsenal opened to the public for visitation back in '04. Now, the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, excuse me, hiccups. The Rocky Mountain Arsenal technically has, sorry, another hiccup, a Commerce City mailing address, and it is surrounded by Commerce City on, oh, what, 3 sides there, 3.5 sides. So however you'd like to do it. However, Denver does have important access to the Arsenal, even though we don't really claim it. The main denizens that I think a lot of people think of when they go to the Arsenal, of course, the bison that we have out there, and the successful introduction of a species that we thought was extinct, the black-footed ferret. They have lots of awesome and amazing programs out at the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, so if you've never been, you should go. Okay, 2004, did you vote yes? Did you vote no? In 2004, Fast Tracks was voted yes by the people within the RTD district. And as part of the general murder and mayhem in 2006, T-Rex, the expansion of I-25 began. So transit and traffic, I mean, all of it, it was just crazy. Now, I love looking back on this. It's just some numbers here for you. T-Rex was slated to be a $1.67 billion project for the expansion of I-25. It added 19 miles of I wrote my numbers down here and I'm confusing myself. Okay, T-Rex added as much as up to 7 lanes in many directions, and the light rail ended up adding 19 miles of double light rail track through the city. See, I'm mixing up my numbers. So this is pretty cool. At this point, we had really only been the original line, but we started to expand. The first of them to open was the line out to the Jefferson County Judicial Center, the Taj Mahal next to Golden, the West Corridor. All of the lines that you see here on our right-hand side, when we voted it in 2004, the expectation was that everything that you see there was supposed to be done by 2015. Now, you and I are a bit past 2015, and many of those are not yet done. It is a very complex tale. Partly it is because of the financial crisis there, 2007-8, right in that area. However, it is very largely built on also a lot of reneged promises from some of RTD's partners. I'm sure RTD has its part as well. It is a very complex discussion. It was supposed to be 2015. Who knows when we're actually going to be able to take the train to Boulder and to Longmont one day. For now, I'm still glad we have it. And T-Rex is done. Woohoo! All right, what's next? Oh, hey, my favorite piece of art in all of Colorado. Now, right now, I know in my heart that all of you are looking at this and your hearts are being filled with wonder, glee, and delight, because I've already told most of you what this statue means. This poor statue is so maligned, but it really shouldn't be, because it means wonderful things. Now, I do have to start off with one piece of bad news I just got. I am planning an art tour as part of next year's tour program out to DIA to see the art. In the past, I have taken tours out there and we've gotten to go up to this wonderful statue. But the lady told me that because of federal regulations and moving of the road, we will never, ever be able to walk up to this statue again, ever. If you do walk up to it, you will be violating federal transportation law and you will be punished. So do not walk up to it. Now, why do I love this statue so much? Well, first of all, it certainly says something, but mostly because of what the artist said. So for those of you who already know this, I apologize for the repetition here. The artist, Luis Jimenez, designed this with 2 ideas in mind. First of all, in the cultures of the South, West, and south of the border, there's this idea that after you die, you go to the land of the dead, and there the animals have these fantastic forms. If you've watched the movie Coco, the cat, the dog, they look amazing in that other world. So the fact that this horse is this bright blue, fantastic color is meant to represent partially the soul of the horse. You're seeing the wonderful and fantastic colors of the horse's soul, not the horse, its soul. And by extension, as Mr. Jimenez said, by extension, you're seeing the spirit of the West. The other part of it is those wonderful eyes. When Mr. Jimenez was designing this piece of art, his father died. And the idea in Hispanic culture is that as long as you remember them, they do not die. They continue to live in the land on the other side. So he wanted to show the world that he loved his father. So the glowing eyes there are not the windows to the furnaces of hell. They are the glowing light of his father's soul. By extension, it's the representation of a son loving his father, or anyone loving any family member. So the problem with the statue is that this information, Mr. Jimenez's interpretation of the statue, is nowhere to be found. So we are left to come up with our own interpretations of it. And that is why it has such a checkered reputation, when in reality, this spirit this statue represents the spirit of the West, this wonderful, exciting, vibrant spirit, and it represents love. So that is why I adore this statue. So the next time you see it, just remember it's about love, and it's about me and you. We live here in the West. All right. Not everything in the first decade of the century was as wonderful as that statue. We did lose our iconic newspaper. Now, the Rocky Mountain News was the first newspaper to be opened in the area in Kansas Territory back in 1859. It made it almost 150 years, almost. It closed in February of 2009. The internet, people's changing tastes for where they get their news, just a whole panoply of things going together to rob the Rocky Mountain News of its readership. It didn't help maybe that there was another newspaper in town, the Denver Post. So just before its 150th birthday, its sesquicentennial, the newspaper did close. So a very sad loss for all of us. The Rocky Mountain News building demolished. It's all gone. So they're over at Colfax and Alati. Nothing. You now have the Van Cise-Simonette Judicial Center and the Van Cise-Simonette prison, I think the detention center, and the Lindsay Flanagan Courthouse. So they sit now where the Rocky Mountain News once was. So that's a sad tale. All right, this one just kind of fun. The Denver Museum of Natural History changed its name to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science back in 2000. Why? Well, they did some surveys and they found out that natural history just didn't read well. People weren't interested in history. They wanted science. Science sells, right? So they ended up changing the name, and the museum has been trying to update. That doesn't mean they've updated everything. If you look at the upper left-hand side there, there's been a lot of contention about those wonderful dioramas there at the museum. So far, they are still there. But some folks have said, ugh, dioramas, that's the old baby. We need new. So it is no longer the Museum of Natural History, DMNS, the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Since we're talking about blue statues, let's talk about what a lot of people consider to be the best blue statue in the state. It's not. We know that's the horse. But for number 2, we have this wonderful one right here. So I have a picture on the left-hand side from the outside. That is the one that most people get. Not as many people go inside the convention center and take the picture from that side, but isn't that a jolly picture there on the right? I don't know. I've always sort of thought of a weird statue to see this giant peeping Tom bear looking in at the folks inside the convention center. It is meant to represent the spirit of fun. But you will admit, I think, that it's a little weird to have a bear looking at you. Maybe it's thinking of you as a tasty treat. I don't know. Anyway, the official name of this piece of art is not the giant blue bear. It is actually called I See What You Mean. And again, basically the bear is looking inside saying, wow, look at all the fun stuff going on in there. So the bear is saying, I see what you mean. And the bear was placed in 2005. The artist, Lawrence Argent, has written up a little bit about the bear, but really not much. So if you have not yet gotten your picture with the giant bear butt of the giant blue bear, you should. It is a tradition, I think, for a lot of tourists. I hadn't even thought about this, but if you look at the picture on the left-hand side, if you go up above the bear, that lit level there above the bear, that is where that bar is, where you may go get your Coke and watch the sunset there at the Hyatt. Wonderful place. Okay, so Fitzsimmons. We talked about how Fitzsimmons was decommissioned. And in 2007, the Anschutz Medical Campus of the University of Denver opened. This place has been going nuts ever since. Now, if you look at the pictures around from the right-hand side down to the bottom, these are some of the pieces that are still left from the original Army Medical Hospital number 21, later Fitzsimmons. On the right-hand side, building 500. That's where the Eisenhower Museum is, which is free. Please go. It's wonderful. The lower middle, you see one of the chapels. Lower left-hand side, you see one of the entry gates. Neither of those buildings is still used. If you look at the upper left-hand side, it gives you a little bit of a map of the campus. I love to take folks onto the campus who haven't been there in a while. This place is going up so fast that folks just get dizzy looking at it. So the Fitzsimmons Campus is what I call it. Calling it the University of Colorado Health Science Center at Anschutz Medical Campus is just, it's too much of a mouthful. It does have 2 light rail stops. And as you see, they've got their little circulator bus to help folks get around, since they did not put the light rail bus or light rail train through the campus as they should have and originally intended to. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Anyway, Fitzsimmons, that all began back in 2007. All right, some things we've lost, very sad. In 2008, Jack Wheel died. He was 107. He founded Rockmount Ranchware back in 1946, and he continued to work until his death at the age of 107. When he died, and for many years prior, he was officially known as the oldest CEO on Earth. He's famous for having created that snap button Western shirt. He also popularized the bolo tie that you see him there wearing. He wrote, "I have always believed that we were never selling just the cowboy. We were selling the romance of the West, and that is so much more." So museums, including the Smithsonian, the Autry Museum of the American West, they have Rockmount shirts. Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan, Robert Redford, Robert Plant, Elvis Presley, Ronald Reagan, David Bowie, lots of people have his shirts. I have a shirt. It's been in lots of movies. It was in Brokeback Mountain. The 2 cowboys wore it. Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, Aidan Quinn, Robert Redford, all of these folks have worn them. Aidan Quinn wore it in a movie my mother-in-law adores, Practical Magic. He was the cop who came to investigate the murder. So these shirts have just been worn all over the place. The street now, Wazee, has a 1-block area that has a nickname. It's called Jack A. Wheel Way. All right, so here's some pictures of Broken Bone Park in downtown Denver at the intersection of 20th and Little Raven. This is something that I've never done. I don't skateboard, but a lot of people do. If you look at the upper left-hand side there, you're going to see an overview. Hold on just a moment. Oh, wait, someone has a big comment here. Oh, that's funny. I knew Mr. Weil. Oh, I never actually have heard it pronounced. It's pronounced Weil. How fun is that? I knew Mr. Weil. He was quite a character. He stopped on his way to work every morning to get donuts for his employees. Being interviewed one year, someone asked him what the best thing of being his age, I think he was about 103, was. He replied, "No peer pressure." Oh, that's great. I love that. I'm not sure about the donuts every day thing. I think that would make for employees who had to do a lot of exercises, but I like the thought. I do like donuts. So Broken Bone Park that you see here in the picture opened in 2001. Denver spent $1.5 million to open it. At the time, it was the largest free of charge skate park of its kind in the entire United States. And there was a lot of debate in the city about its creation. Former councilperson Joyce Foster was key in its creation, and there is some discussion about renaming it in her honor. It is a much beloved park. There was some talk about, oh, it'll bring down housing values, or it'll bring in rabble, or whatever it was. But Councilperson Joyce Foster and others said, you know, everyone should be a part of the revitalization of downtown Denver, everyone. So we need to create amenities for everyone. I always joke and call it Broken Bone Park. It's not really called Broken Bone Park. It's the Denver Skate Park. But yeah, I always call it Broken Bone Park. I guess that's because I don't skateboard. Anyway, 2001, this was really a game changer. It was the first of its kind of this size in the nation. Now, in that area, what was going on? Well, it was the redevelopment of the area behind Union Station. Huge redevelopment. This map that you see on the upper left-hand side talks about each of these quadrants here in the Denver infill site. One of the buildings that went in, you see there on the right-hand side, that's the Glass House. People were moving in because this area was going to be key to the city. It has the transit, it has the history, it has the proximity. I mean, you have to admit, you are right next to almost everything. And a lot of people wanted to live there. The building that you see here on the right-hand side, it was put up right about the time when the Millennium Bridge went in, and that's the bridge you see in the foreground of the picture there. When that building went for sale, those are the Palisade, or no, is it Promenade or Palisade? I can't remember suddenly. When that building went for sale in 2000, there was a building behind it, the picture taker too. Every single unit in there sold that afternoon. People knew that this was going to be the place to be. So the development, the Union Station redevelopment area has been absolutely histrionic. I mean, just going nuts. It's the promenade lofts. There you go. Too many P's in my head. Okay, so since this time, the Union Station redevelopment area has just grown hugely. That's not to say there hasn't been a problem here and there, but it has really been amazing. One of the things that went up in the area that was not for private use was the EPA District 8 office that you see there in the upper left-hand side. Because it is the EPA district office, when it opened in 2007, it came equipped with a lot of very innovative, LEED certified ideas, including a green roof that you see here on the lower right-hand side, solar panels, upper right-hand side, it had no flush toilets, etc. Now, to be fair, every new technology has a period of working out the bugs. I think people poo-poo that. They assume that because the technology does not work instantly, right now, that it's bad. We had a really terrible driver on our tour up in Alaska, and he just said that solar power was a hideous mistake because it didn't work all the time in Alaska. So I thought, dude, just because you have 6 months of dark doesn't mean you don't have 6 months of light. There are ways to make things work. Some of the technology here at the EPA building has proven successful. Some of it has not. But that's part of any new technology. You have to experiment, work out the kinks. Another thing that has opened in that immediate area is the Museum of Contemporary Art. Now, it had actually been founded a decade earlier, but they were waiting to get into a building just for themselves. So in 2007, the new building opened. You see it here at the intersection of 15th and Delgany, or is it Wewata? I think it's Wewata. Anyway, this museum has a wonderful rooftop patio, and you should totally go. The art, I will say, they do change it out from time to time. Sometimes it's a little weird and hard to fathom, but sometimes it's innovative and exciting and evocative, so it is well worth a go. 2007, the Museum of Contemporary Art. We really have some amazing museums in the metropolitan area, and I think a lot of people don't realize they are there. My favorite is the Madden Museum, which I don't even remember. Have we talked about the Madden Museum in these presentations? I cannot remember. Anyway, if you haven't been to the Madden Museum, please go. Before the pandemic, it was free, and it's my favorite museum in the metropolitan area. It's my favorite art museum, excuse me, in the metro area. Okay, another amazing thing happened here. I am the one giving this presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and, with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek here, I'm going to tell you of a wonderful thing that happened during this decade. Ladies and gentlemen, look at that youthful fellow there. In 2005, I started giving tours. I stopped my career as an ESL teacher when the school I worked at closed, and I got into touring. So the upper left, lower right, you see me on some tours. It's a little hard to see me lower left-hand side there. And there's Sean Snow, upper right-hand corner there, giving a tour. So 2005, I got started giving tours. Holy snot. Have you been to the Toy and Miniature Museum? Yes, I have. Although I think right now, I heard through this the grapevine that that might end up being sold. I'm not 100% certain on that, so don't quote me on that. It's through the grapevine. So ladies and gentlemen, 2005, so I'll be celebrating my 18th year touring this year. Who would have ever thought I'd still be doing it this many years later? Certainly not I. Okay, so some upcoming tours. Won't you join us? Digging into Douglas County is May 25th. Don't be afraid. Douglas County, Jim Weglar's wonderful fellow. He and his folks there with the Douglas County Historical Society and all their colleagues have put together a wonderful day for us. Some of the things that we're going to see I have already seen, but some of them are new to me. We have a delicious lunch right in the middle. We're going to talk quarries. It's going to be a great tour. Even though I be a teetotaler, if you drink beer, do join us for the beer extravaganza in June. You see some folks on the upper right-hand side there having a jolly time on one of our previous goes. That's Marilyn and Laura. Hi, Marilyn. Hi, Laura. Our beer extravaganza, June 29th. Idaho Springs and Georgetown, we're going to do some exploration July 1st. A lot of people go to Central City and Blackhawk, but they don't give as much time of day to Idaho Springs and Georgetown. And another date you should all remember, and it is no BS. Ha ha ha, look at that picture. Setting the course. May 11th is going to be when we unveil the tours for 2024. We are going to have an in-person event and it will be live streamed just as we're doing this. So for those of you who don't live in Colorado, like Sarah, hi Sarah, you are welcome to attend remotely. So setting the course, our tours for 2024, May 11th from 6 to 8 in the evening. And then, as I said, that is no BS. All right, hold on, I'm going to do this question. Someone's saying, I liked Georgetown and the other cities before gambling. We'll talk about that when we're up there. Georgetown, I don't think Georgetown has gambling. I think it's just Blackhawk and Central City. If I recall correctly, unless I've missed something, Idaho Springs and Georgetown don't have any. This fountain, here you see it in the day and here you see it at night, was part of that wonderful 2008 presidential convention. We fixed the fountain in Farrell Lake at City Park. The fountain with its wonderful light shows for years had sat broken because of a lightning strike. Well, we repaired it for the 2008 convention. I live very close to City Park, so I go over and see this all the time. It is near to my heart, and it was repaired for that wonderful political to-do that we had there in town. Okay, hard to believe, but the very last one of these that we are going to do will be next month. We will have covered all of Colorado history. I don't even know how that's possible. This year has already flown, and it's already been a year of presentations before that. So at this point, do you have any questions? And you are not obligated to have any questions. But if you do, please shout. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat window again. You are always welcome to call me or email me. I hope that you will feel free to. Oh my goodness, a Google search shows that the Madden Museum is temporarily closed. Ooh, that is sad. I hope they reopen it because the Madden Museum is so amazing. Holy guac. Okay, thank you for looking that up because my heart will be broken if that should stay closed forever. All right, so I'm happy to see some beautiful faces on there that I recognize. I hope you are all healthy and very, very happy. Today was such a beautiful day of spring and I am filled with every bit of glee. I shall see you again very soon. I see no more questions coming in, so everyone have a beautiful night. Thank you for joining. I'll see you in April.
Thanks, Kevin.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.